Today I'm going to talk about my opinion on crops, whips, and spurs. Yes, I took off the hat. It was making really strange shadows on my face, and it started annoying me through the camera. So I always ride a Earl with a crop because sometimes if my legs get tired or he's just being lazy, I'll need a crop. I've ridden in spurs for probably half of a lesson, and I don't use whips unless I'm free lunging or lunging. So I'm going to start with crops because that's what I'm most familiar with. I've never hit a horse so hard that they bleed, or I don't even really hit them hard when I do hit them, and it's really, most of the time it's just a tap unless I really, really need it. The horse is being way too lazy and not listening to any of my aids. But I'll usually carry it in my right hand because that is just the hand I feel comfortable with. I'll use it through the corner if we need to get to a jump faster or down like a line that we need much more impulsion, because I've been through lines where we will completely bomb the first jump and then 3 strides later we take out the second jump completely. It's not fun. I'll tap them behind the leg, soft tap or medium tap, just to get them going just a little bit. I don't use it unless I really need to, which I think some people take the extensive side and go a little bit too far because they're like, oh, we need to go further, so I'm not going to use my leg because my hand is here with the crop, so I'm going to whack them with the crop to make them go forward instead of actually riding correctly and using your leg. Because hitting a horse with the crop is supposed to be an extension of your leg or arm or however you're going to use it, so same as any other artificial aid that you're going to use, and therefore you can't just use it as your own aid. I use it when my legs are getting tired or if I really don't think he's going to listen to me. So the people who go into that extensive part where they literally keep whipping their horses with the crops, especially if the horse is behaving perfectly and they just need a little bit more leg, I think that's a little bit insane, and they do not need to do that. Now, whips kind of are in that same boat of you can use them, but you can't be extensive. Like when people are doing liberty work, they go and they kind of touch the sides of the horses unless they're whipping the horses with it, which I think is awful. And there's so many videos that you could search up that these people are trying to get the horse to dance, which horse dancing, where they train the horses to dance in the worst ways possible, is my least favorite, because there are proper ways to train a horse to dance without abuse. They will whip these horses on the legs, on the back, on the butt, on the head sometimes even. And actually, FEI states in one of their rules, I forget exactly which one, but if the use of the crop on the horse's face can get you either disqualified or eliminated from the competition, or any blood that shows from using a crop too hard can get you eliminated from a competition. And I think whips are good for an extension of your arm, but like soft, light touches are all you need. Do not whip your horses because they do not deserve that, because they're trying their hardest. Using it for liberty work is good because it gives you that extension of your arm and they listen to your cues more if you do it correctly. Then you can eventually get to the point where you don't need a whip. If you start without the whip, then you can continue to progress and just keep it without the whip. If you start with a whip, eventually, once they get used to you having the whip, you can eventually train the horse to get out of that habit and listen to your hands and your body language and your voice. Or just like you can do without using crops, you can tell them walk, trot, canter. Or a lot of horses actually do respond very well to voice commands if you train them correctly, which is so much better than having artificial aids, because artificial aids can hurt the horse or traumatize the horse or make the horse scared if you don't use them correctly. Now, I'm going to go into spurs, because spurs, I rode with spurs once for half of a lesson, and I hated every minute of it. It wasn't my normal trainer who asked me to do it, and it wasn't my old trainer who asked me to do it. It was I guess I call her the substitute trainer because my real trainer couldn't do it. And she was there, and I was riding her horse, so I guess I could have, like, that was kind of something that she was allowed to tell me what to do, but I was very uncomfortable the whole entire time. But she put me in spurs, and they were small spurs. They were like blunt-tipped small spurs that a lot of equestrians wear, that just went on my foot, like no spinny things, no points, really just that blunt, tiny spur. But I was still very uncomfortable, and I felt so bad every single time I would use my leg because I felt like I was just jabbing him hard in the stomach. Now, there's people who I think can wear spurs and be completely fine with them. Like my trainer wears spurs on a lot of her horses, and they're the tiny ones again, those same ones, but none of her horses have spur marks, and the horse responds really well, and she doesn't use them unless she has to. Now, this lady didn't actually teach me how to use spurs, really. She just kind of was like, okay, just use the spurs. Here you go. I'll put them on you. And she just let me go, and I was kind of like, okay, I've never used spurs before, and I was kind of hesitant beforehand. I was like, she asked me, she was like, do you need spurs? And I was like, no. And I did a few more laps, and then she comes back to me, and she's like, you need spurs. Yeah, you need spurs. And I was like, okay. And then, so I went over, and I put on spurs, and I've never worn spurs since. But there are people who will be good and wear the tinier spurs, and they're good at wearing the spurs. Like, the horses don't get spur marks, and they use them correctly and only when they need to. And then there are the people who don't know how to wear spurs, or they wear way too big spurs for what they're doing. Like, I saw, it was my friend's sister, actually, and I really don't like saying this because she's really, really nice, but the spurs that she was wearing were probably this big. Now, they were rolly tip, so they were a little softer than if she had a point, but the horse had spur marks, not blood or anything like that, but just spur marks of just the skin being rubbed from wearing the spurs. And she wasn't in the position, in my opinion, to be wearing spurs, because if she just put on more leg, which maybe she's younger, so she doesn't have as much leg strength as when you get older or after you ride a lot more. But if she would have put on more leg or had just smaller spurs, because these spurs were huge, like, I just did not agree with them, and she would have been fine. She also was a little bit too timid to use the crop on the horse, which the horse didn't need a crop because he was not listening. He was being very lazy. And she was scared to use the crop because she didn't like using the crop. She thought it was inhumane, which, yeah, it can be, but a light tap on the shoulder would have woke that horse up just a little bit more. And you don't need to do it hard. You don't need to do it repetitive. One tap after you ask them, and then tell them, and then demand them. And on the demand part, you ask once. You ask with your legs. And then when you tell them, you add more leg and kind of be determined. And then when you demand it, then you can use the artificial aid, but in a nice way, if you know what I mean. So a light tap just to tell them, hey, I'm here, you need to listen to me. So that's not as bad as the people who wear the huge, ginormous, spiky, rolly spurs. And a lot of cowboys and bronc riding riders, and I'm not stereotyping at all, it's just that's what I seem to see it on, is those big, huge rolly things where the horses just get spurred constantly. And even in English riding, there have been people, even with the blunt spurs, who use the spurs way too much, and they just spur their horses constantly where there's just blood or so many marks, and I think that's the worst thing ever. But I mean, not all spurs are bad, just like not all crops and not all whips are bad, and you just got to use them properly if you're going to use them, and you need to know how to use them, and you need to know that your horse is going to be okay with you using them, because if you get on a random horse and maybe don't desensitize them to it, like a new horse, like a green horse, or a horse that has never been ridden in in crops or spurs or doesn't need it, and you go and you just go with it, you need to kind of desensitize them and get them used to it first, because you're going and you're going and you're going and you tap them with the crop and then they're like, oh my gosh, what just happened? And they freak out. That's bad for both you and the horse, because the horse is never going to want a crop to be used on them again, and they're going to flip out and it'll probably be traumatizing. So that is kind of my opinion on crops and whips and spurs. Again, they're not all bad, and I'm not stereotyping. That's just my opinion. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.